As you are the last panelist, you have all the time in the world, and we are 5 seconds away from being live. We are live.
Welcome to the fourth industrial revolution to Society 5.0 Sustainability, Fintech, Data Regulations, ESG panel session for Digital Week Online. Cities ABC and Open Business Council are focused with the vision to provide platforms and solutions to enable digital transformation of cities, businesses and citizens. I'm Hilton Supra, the Vice Chairman of Ztudium Group of companies, and I'm very pleased to moderate on this panel with such esteemed participants. Earlier today, we had various panel sessions that covered digital transformation in Society 5.0 and the fourth industrial revolution, how to make it happen for cities and countries, how to reinvent cities and nations at a time of COVID-19, government and business digital transformation challenges and opportunities. We talked about smart cities, trends, opportunities and challenges, big data and cybersecurity for nations and businesses, and of course, all round digital transformation in the AI and blockchain world. There's some takeaways that stick to my mind. Digital transformation should not really digitize bureaucracy, but should reinvent it. Traffic congestion impacts account for about 1% of GDP globally. AI and ethics need to co-evolve with us, which is a challenge. And citizens need to be empowered to engage, to change things in digital transformation. Today, I am joined by three admirable leaders in the technology world. First, Pylarinou, who's a global influencer in Fintech and fourth industrial revolution technology, talking to us today from Fribourg in the canton of Fribourg in Switzerland. She's a global Fintech and blockchain influencer, advisor to Fintech companies, particularly focusing on capital markets, wealth, and asset management transformations. She started her career studying at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, in terms of business administration, and then did a thesis in a chaotic approach to stock market returns, and then an MBA and a PhD in finance. Ellie is a very independent Fintech and blockchain advisor, a very seasoned Wall Street professional. And I mean, the list is enormous, but you're an influencer and listed in the top influencers all over the technology world. Then there's Kristof from Spiegeleer, who's passionate social entrepreneur who believes that respect and transparency is the basis of all solid businesses. He studied at the University of Ghent, where he did his master's degree in engineering, and then at Leuven, where he did his postgraduate studies in management economics. He strongly believes in doing good for the world and providing return to investors because they can coexist together. His companies that he currently has is ThreeFold, a decentralized peer-to-peer autonomous cloud system inspired by nature, which we'll hear a little bit about today, which is up to 10 times more efficient and secure in performance than the current technologies that we have today. And then, of course, he's built it based on a completely autonomous and decentralized network, and we'll hear a lot more of that later. Then we've got Hirander Misra, which I've had the pleasure of interviewing before. He's the chairman and CEO of GMEX Group and SecDex, and co-chair of various organizations like the Arabian Bourse and DAG Global, and partners with the Digital Partners Network, focusing on providing infrastructure for trading in securities, derivatives, crypto, etc., and tokenization markets, working through Mauritius and Seychelles. Mindex, which was the Mauritius-based international derivatives and commodity exchange, he had did some great work there in the beginning. And then we have where we're going to go off today. Basically, Effie, Kristof, and Hirander, thank you very much for joining us today. I'd like to ask all of you just to give 5 minutes of your time in terms of looking at your role in terms of digital transformation, your experiences to date, and your vision in the transformative world. Effie?
Oh, that is, I'll try to make it in 5 minutes.
You can have 10.
I can have 10. You know, as you already mentioned, that I come from the traditional world. It doesn't get more traditional than Wall Street, but the last nearly 7 years, I've been focused on fintech. And because of that, I've seen and felt and lived through the transformations that are not really only technological on the surface. They're technological, but they're about changing business cultures, practices, and the way we are served as end customers and the way businesses operate. So I must say that what we thought was a disruption, 4 or 5 years ago, is not anymore an innovator and a disruptor. So we have, I would say, the incumbents, and then we have the fintechs that disrupted and continue to disrupt the incumbents. And then we have the second wave of disruption that is probably coming from the blockchain world and, decentralized finance and so on, which at the surface might seem like it's not really to pay attention. It's too small, and it is too small, but it is really changing the essence of capital markets. And I hope that we have the opportunity to talk about that with my colleagues that have background also overlapping in this area. But all in all, I must say that I continue to be more alert than ever in what is happening in the world and how it's changing. I thought that alertness and the pace of innovation would dissipate, but it hasn't. It has not dissipated, despite the fact that, of course, in this macro environment, we have funding issues that have changed, especially for early startups, but still the pace of innovation is there. We have important pockets of experimentation, true disruption that is going on. And my sort of job and mission here is to identify it and see how it connects with the current world, how it's going to affect it in terms of business practices, not so much which company is going to survive and who's going to be the winner, but what is going to be the next new normal that is going to be either leapfrogged by the incumbents or adopted by others and so on. So I'm very excited about what is going on. And at the same time, my focus has always been, what are the unintended negative consequences of these innovations that all start with a good intention, maybe to serve an unserved customer, to democratize access, for example, is the classic thing. But there are other unintended negative consequences in the industry, for the regulators, and also for the society. Because the truth is that despite all the technological innovation that is going on, not only in finance, but in all businesses, the social innovation is lacking, and we cannot keep up. We have a huge mismatch and a huge gap that is widening. And again, I hope that we can talk about this more. So let me hand it over to you, respecting the time. And these are points that I'd like to circle back in our discussion.
Thank you, Effie. I've made note of that, so I'll circle back to that at the appropriate time. Thank you. I'm Kristof.
Yes.
Obviously, your role in digital transformation is huge. You've had incredible experiences and you're having great vision. So we're excited to hear a little bit more about that.
Thank you. So nice to be here and nice to virtually meet you all. So from origin, I am a nerd engineer, have always been busy with these computers, and that was my world. But a couple of years ago, after also having some exits, I realized that there is something much bigger going on than just selling yet another company, which is this world as we see today is indeed changing, like Effie already said. And it's changing very rapidly. And if we're not going to do something, then maybe potentially it will not change in the right way. Now, I was lucky when I came out of university, I was one of the first guys on the internet. I was working for the first ISP, it was all just happening. And the internet used to be a very free place where just everyone was connecting cables, everyone was connecting their computers. And actually there was something beautiful happening. And it was a true peer-to-peer system where you had people providing something, reading something, and it was very free. There were no firewalls, you didn't have to protect yourself. It was all actually rather beautifully decentralized. And then we saw over these years a lot of things happening, and not always for the best, right? Today, that internet became 5 to 10% of the electricity consumption, as an example, in the world, which is crazy. Less than 20 companies globally own more than 80% of the internet capacity, storage and compute. So there became a huge disbalance also on the internet, just like we have it for the other things in the world as well. And this got me as an entrepreneur about 10 years ago, where I said, look, we need to do something. We need to use what we have created over all these years, experience and anything else, to basically try and change something. Because I believe that the way forward for the world is the way forward where awareness goes up. And what do I mean with that? Awareness of what the world is, who we are. And it starts with the world itself, of course, physical. I mean, what is that world for, like the climate and so on, that everyone is aware of, right? The second thing is about ourselves. We need to look at ourselves. But today it's very difficult because we're manipulated everywhere where we go. The information we read, how can we know it's even true? How can we even believe what's going on? So it's super difficult to get in our own power to basically make a change in this world. So basically this brings us to the third thing which needs to happen, which is our digital systems need to get more awareness. And that's actually what we stand for. So I started thinking like, okay, what can we do? How can we go back actually to where we were at the beginning of the internet? Because at that time it was very decentralized. So why can't we go back to that? But that of course is not possible. You cannot just turn the clock back because a lot of things happened in between. And then blockchain happened. And I was like, something new is happening, right? Maybe that's the solution for everything. Well, yes and no. It was a very good step and it shows that certain things are possible. But thinking that blockchain is going to deliver us every solution and be the Swiss Army knife for every problem on our internet, that is not going to happen, and it's not true. It's a technology like any other technologies which has some great capabilities, and it shows us that things can be done. So basically, to sort of round off where I'm going for, I believe that the solution is in back empowering us as people, as digital people. Why don't we give every person on the planet a digital avatar? Basically, we exist on a new sort of more free internet, which is owned by all of us together. So not by 20 companies in the world. We need to have an internet which is co-owned, right? Just like it was intended to be in the beginning. And then all of us get a digital avatar, which is only owned by us. And this digital avatar has our data, it's our digital life. And all these digital avatars can now talk to each other. For that, you also don't need a blockchain, by the way. Blockchain would be for money or for certain, maybe smart contracts or something. But just the nature of bringing people back into their power, I believe would really resolve a lot of what we're looking for. And that way we can raise awareness. We can, again, know much better who. Is the information I'm reading, is it true? If basically I'm getting something, it can come from my region, like now in Corona, which in my opinion is a really good step. I mean, it opens up new possibilities. People now more than ever are looking at digital because they have to. So basically, if we are smart and we work together, all of us, to create this new internet in a truly peer-to-peer world, or through peer-to-peer way, we could basically change the way how this industrial revolution is happening, but in a way it comes from all of us. That's sort of my vision for this digital world.
Thank you. Essentially what you're doing is you've really developed the whole vision from where you put the individual at the center of that industrial revolution, and it's society 5.0.
Exactly.
Hirander.
Yeah, I mean, this is interesting. I mean, I got into blockchain about 5 years ago, and then looked at the supply chain with agri-commodities and gold in Africa, and how smallholder farmers could be empowered through use of technology and just better access to information. And certainly that was very interesting. And then when we looked at those results, and then, I've got a 24-year background in capital markets, a lot of these new technologies were emerging, and you had regulation on the one hand and centralized exchanges, and then the decentralized constructs on the other hand, and obviously centralized unregulated exchanges. And again, out there, various practitioners started to tout the fact, digital is a very misused word, but they started to tout the fact that, yes, we're launching digital exchanges, we're launching, democratized digital marketplaces, but in reality, there's no fundamental change in the capital markets construct to what we've been accustomed to when markets first went electronic in the 1990s. It's very much remained siloed, and actually there's even more fragmentation now, as we've now got the traditional world of SWIFT payments and traditional exchanges, and the new world with multiple blockchains and various constructs built over the top of that. And actually interconnecting those is very, very difficult. So we kind of looked at this 3 years ago, and then looked to see how we could use technology to interconnect those different pools, but also allow more efficient transfer. Because why, we looked at various points of friction. Today I was on a call on a SWIFT payment, and it was going to take 8 days from one bank to another. We shouldn't be in this position in this day and age. If you look at now, we're communicating, or I might be on Vodafone, you might be on Orange, but we can talk to each other, and it doesn't really matter what network we're using. In the world of capital markets, there are so many inefficiencies. So we looked at that and we said, well, actually, for the next 10 years, the old way of doing things isn't necessarily going to change. And whilst a new way of doing things is very much going to propagate itself, as Effie said as well, there's a slow movement, and the technology's got to develop as well. And we said, okay, how do we bridge the old world and the new, which is key? Because, if there are thousands of banks on SWIFT and a few hundred on Ripple, both have to coexist and both have to interconnect. So, this is key, I think, because even now technology has empowered us with smartphones and tablets, and two things resonated with me. You mentioned, Hilton, at the start of this, digitized bureaucracy, and we've got to try and avoid that. And, we're certainly seeing much more of that. And also constructs are being created by incumbents that aren't necessarily good for society or consumers, or whether it's even B2C activity converging with B2B, which has to happen inevitably. And these constructs are artificial, because obviously there are many who believe in maintaining the status quo because this could be quite disruptive to them. And there are other proponents that kind of think about going overly social, but our view has always been you've got to teach an individual to fish rather than catch the fish for them. So how do we make it sustainable rather than reliance on charity? And we'll speak about that certainly as we get through this. So I think the internet's fundamentally changed the way that we do things, and we can have an argument on whether it's become too controlled, but at the same time, a lot of what we do on the capital market side is very much centralized, even if it's kind of touted as a decentralized construct. It really isn't. It's a centralized construct in sheep's clothing, in effect.
You're absolutely right. That's very interesting. Thank you, Hirander. I mean, 4IR offers huge potential to transform and realign our economies and societies in a very sustainable way. There's an increasing realization that 4IR can both help, but amplify problems for people and the planet. So can the panel explore and recommend governance structures and policy mechanisms to ensure governments have the agility and ability to keep pace with 4IR and harness sustainable innovations that promise the greatest social and environmental returns? Effie?
Hilton, this is a topic that is dear to my heart, because when I think of these issues, I go back to the basics and say, what matters is your intention. Whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're a regulator, whether you're an agent at the government or in another decision-making capacity. What matters is the intention that you have with your policies and what you want to accomplish. And this is the same with technology. And since we're all talking about how to deploy technologies to create better lives, better societies, maybe focus on certain groups that are disadvantaged and so on. The issue is where you put your energy is where you're going to get the results and the change. So for me, the big question is, where have we been putting our energy? We as in governments, regulators, the people and the frameworks that shape everything and create the structure and the framework in which we operate. Basically, we have only been putting our focus in financial results. We have been looking at optimizing the financial economy, if you want, forgetting that the economy is a much broader concept. It's actually a Greek word, and I'm Greek. Economy is about managing and taking care of ecos. Ecos is home. Home in the sense of, economy really means everything. It's not only about the finances. It's about the ecology. It's about how you treat people. It's about everything. So basically what's happened up to now is our intention and our focus has only been on financial results and not on economic results. Our metrics, our focus, everything has been on these financial results. And this is not the right direction. We need to reprioritize and change. I'm not saying that we are going to ignore the financial results and, the return on investment and so on, but it cannot be isolated. We have put it in a silo, in a pedestal, and everything else is pretty much what I was talking about before. We have unintended consequences, and we're sorry about them, and we introduce now ESG and so on. So in that respect, there's many things that we need to do, but we need to start from changing our priorities and maximizing economic values rather than only financial values. So that is where I think that we need to make sure that we deploy all these technologies that we've been talking about and all the concepts of, smart cities, of circular economies and all that. Through this lens, we are trying to maximize economic value, not shareholder value. That is not the first priority, for example, in public markets or in private markets. And we can start with very small steps. I'll give you an example. Look at the public markets, the quarterly reporting systems. What are they? They're pure and strict financial results, right? This is the 21st century. Hirander spoke before about 8 days, money moving between banks and not knowing where it is. This is a comparable example, what I'm saying. Financial quarterly reporting of public companies, and there's no focus on the impact or metrics on the economy.
Yeah.
Let me stop here.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And thank you for that. And in terms of what you're doing, Kristof, in terms of the governance structures and policy, and ensure that there's this engagement from citizens who feel empowered to actually get involved in helping to shape that, I'm quite sure there's something that you're doing that can really help that.
Yes, first of all, I would like to agree 1000% with Effie, which is world is completely focused on efficiency, and efficiency is what matters, right? They go like everything needs to be more efficient, faster, more out of the same thing. And that is leading to these big issues which we are having. We're exploiting the world and the people and everything around us. And as such, everything is kind of crashing down. Now in nature, there is a much more beautiful balance between resilience, making sure things will stay there, and efficiency. And that's what we lost as politicians or even companies. It doesn't have to be politicians. They're always focused on more efficiency, taking more out of the same thing, right? And that is something which needs to change. Actually, we need to become less efficient. And there, obviously, giving more power to the people in the street can potentially help. But it needs to be in a way that everything becomes more transparent, because we are today so used to centralization that governments and everyone else believe that through centralization, they get more efficiency. And often it will get abused. Let me give you an example. Through centralization, governments or companies can abuse the data from the users, and as such, they can, if they want to, manipulate or at least influence the outcome of, as an example, election or buying behavior or anything. Yes, this can make things more efficient or faster in the direction they want, but it's not good. Let me give you another example. Because of centralization, which is not even in the country, the countries feel the need to hack their citizens. What do we mean with that? I mean, we're using services out of our countries and they want to see what's going on for security. So basically, out of that wish to sort of see what's going on and protect the citizens, they will start doing hacking. Well, that's not okay, because I call this hacking. There is no other word for it. Putting equipment in these massive data centers or in your telco environments to basically sniff everything and sort of see what's going on, but that leads to a lot of issues. Well, what if we turn that around, and what if we put the citizen in the center and we say, look, our rules need to be transparent. And actually in Switzerland is a good example, because that is a country which is very transparent about many of these things, but it needs to go to a much wider scale, which is, yes, if you want to see your data, so be it, but it needs to be transparent. If you want to allow people to do something with the information which is out there, we need to be transparent again. So I'm a big advocate that one thing the governments or cities or any around that needs to change is not basically forcing us into more rules around limiting us more down, do actually the reverse, which is empowering us more, but in such a way it's transparent so that we know what we are up to. Like, yes, I live in a country X. In that country, they want to see my data, so I'm fine. So I allow my government to do so, but everything becomes transparent. So that's basically one of the things which potentially is something that governments could think about, which is getting back to transparency and giving more power to their users, and in such a way together change what we are in, and not relying on some central companies or instances which are not even part of our country.
Indeed. And Hirander, from your experience, you come from a very financially centric world.
Yeah, no, but actually, comments there, both by Kristof and Effie, resonated with me, because Effie's absolutely right. I mean, there is a lot of short-termism in markets, in the investment constructs that we have. I mean, I was with a senior individual from a blue chip company last night, and we were talking about certain areas that particular firm should be going into, but they're not, because it doesn't have a short-term impact on the share price. Whereas actually, we know if we take a time horizon, maybe 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, that could reap far more dividends. But actually, the CEO is only as good as his immediate results, right? And that share price has got to move upwards. And as Effie said, those metrics are totally misaligned. I mean, I've had this, as an entrepreneur, because we, as you know, Hilton, always take a 5 to 10 year view of this, and we've become self-sustainably built what we built to date, but we've taken a view where we haven't been overly bothered about the numbers in the near term, because we know we can build far more value. Yet, if you speak and you go out for investment and you speak to traditional PE investors, they really don't get that, because they kind of deconstruct your financial models backwards, and you try and explain kind of where you're headed, but they really don't get it. So we've always tried to strategically align with those that have the thought process that's aligned to where we want to go and are willing to give up some short-term value for more medium-term gain. So that's one thing. Transparency is a really interesting concept because, again, coming from a financial world, we've seen data really is being misused in multiple ways, whether it's you going out to a supermarket buying a basket of goods, but that's being sold to hedge funds, then so they know whether to buy or sell, Heinz as a company or anything else, right? It's got to be wrong. And equally, the large social media networks are using our data without any real value back to us. Now, I'm not saying that can't be a mechanism to distribute our data and utilize it, but should we not get paid every time that's utilized? And equally, should we not be able to control our data so that we can create our own instruments and monetize those? Because the technological constructs, the ability to be transparent, the ability to use blockchain for immutable records of that, how it's being utilized, it definitely exists. The other thing is, it's interesting, we do a lot of work in Africa, and there is a social angle to this, whether it's smallholder farmers on the one hand and better access to markets. A lot of the time, it's interesting, you speak to DFIs, and they're allocating whether it's capital that might be investment capital, but by their investment arms, or whether it's just grant funding, but it very much goes to their friends, and there's a real measurement in terms of what the end results for that are. Now, in reality, we could actually measure, we could track the amount of capital coming in into a given country. We could see how that's being allocated, and we could measure the results. But you could argue actually there's a vested interest for that not to happen by governments and others, right? So there's got to be a level of government change, and we all too often see policy misaligned with regulation, and certainly, countries that have stolen the march to try and align that more closely. Singapore was tiny 30 years ago. Look at it now. And certainly we're seeing that in the UAE, whether it's in Abu Dhabi and other constructs, but Seychelles too. So Kristof made an interesting point. I mean, ultimately, whether data is controlled or not, or how it's controlled in a given society, we can make a choice whether to live there. Effie's Greek, and she's in one of the cantons, for example, and there's an element of arbitrage here, policy arbitrage, regulatory arbitrage, that we can use in our favor, right? Because ultimately we could flock to those jurisdictions that are more conducive to empowering us.
Yes, but I want to add something on listening to you guys in terms of governance. Obviously, technology can help us here. For example, we could have more participatory budgeting frameworks in cantons or in countries, right? Whether it's through blockchain or non-blockchain, we could start implementing those processes, and basically in that way we're empowering the citizens instead of having the senators and the politicians. But this, again, all the pilots in schemes like that have proven that the benefits to the society of a participatory budgeting process can only be seen after 5 and 7 years.
Yeah.
And we live in a world where we've been trained to want the instant satisfaction. So, it's not clear whether we are ready for the change of these processes that will have a lot of impact and will, make things, governance better, and will give us as a society a sense of fairness that is lacking from the current web and internet world that we're living in. I think what Kristof is saying is that, we've traded convenience and so on the internet, right, that we all dwell in. And it was never built to be fair. And the way it's been organized by these big, corporations that are organizing our life on the internet, it's not fair. And that's the big problem. Can we change that? Fairness
But
through responsibility too, right?
But I don't believe through rules we can change this, because many people think, oh, let's just put some more rules in place and now everything will be resolved. But that often makes the problem only worse. It needs, in my opinion, to start with empowering the individual person, because then automatically a lot of those rules won't even be needed anymore. Once people need to be accountable again, because today we can be too easy anonymous. Let's just imagine that it would become difficult to be anonymous. Just that, right? That alone would make accountability much higher, because if you write about something or voice your expression, you are accountable for what you write. So it becomes easier for everyone to see what the value of information is, because that's the biggest problem today. People don't know anymore what to believe or what not to believe. So how can we even vote if there would be a voting system or blockchain or this or that? Because it's very hard for the normal person to even figure out what is now the reality, because they're overwhelmed by so many sometimes manipulated sources of information, that it becomes super hard to even make that system work. And that's why I believe the first thing which needs to happen, instead of putting more rules, because more rules is at the end only making the cage smaller and smaller and smaller. It's more like making sure that people need to take responsibility for their actions, and they stop looking for the source of the problems with their politicians or with people around, but they'll also look at themselves, how they behave on this digital world, what they talk about, that they're not basically abusing the system by themselves. And then I believe things will become better much faster.
So, Kristof, you're proposing flipping around the current governance model, which is top down, and having it bottom up. And then, of course, the question is, do individuals want that responsibility?
Well, is there an alternative? Because that's a little bit the problem with the society today. It's always the mistake of something else.
Yeah.
And the moment people stop doing that and they say, no, it's not the politician or it's not even that company, because at the end, I can decide what I buy. I can even decide where my kid goes to school. So from the moment that everyone says, I'm going to look at my own being and how I behave, and everyone starts doing that, basically the world is tomorrow another place. Tomorrow, not after tomorrow, not in a year, tomorrow. But today, most people feel hopeless because they are, what am I going to do? I'm one of 7 billion, right? And I'm being manipulated left and right anyhow. So my vote doesn't count, nothing counts. So they are hopeless. But by restoring that and empowering them again, that they know that whatever they do has an impact, but they shouldn't look at the others. The moment that people flip that around and they say, no, you're right, we can do other things. We can decide what we buy. We can decide where to live. We have that choice. And they take that choice, things start tomorrow. So it's a lot to do with mentality and awareness again, being aware of our own power.
So it's self-sovereignty at the end of the day in terms of data, owning your data and being transparent and trusting everybody else around you.
Yes, but that comes with also making sure that everyone is accountable. Because today it's too easy. You just become a troll and anonymously you do whatever on Twitter or this or that. And even actually people can lie. And it's even so that many people say, it's okay, because they get it from some examples, right? They say, oh, lying, well, what does it matter? I know. Actually, these basic values need to be restored. It's not okay to lie, and everyone needs to take that responsibility. And by restoring identity and making sure that people don't get away that easily with lying and to do whatever they want, you restore trust. By restoring trust, you can believe in the information again. By believing in the information, you can build a new network of trust as such, and people get empowered and things change.
I mean, that really is the essence of Society 5.0, because, you know, again, if we look at the experience we've had, I mean, again, in the past, we worked with Japanese investors, and Society 5.0, obviously, as you know, Hilton, was coined in Japan. And there it was always about, okay, we'll take less growth, but we'll take more sustainability. Now, actually, the technologies at our fingertips are more than ever before, you know, whether it's AI with machine learning, blockchain, whether we look at quantum computing, IoT, and at the moment, you know, we can see, you know, just with what Kristof is talking about. All right, you know, how do we create that transparency, but also how do we make data more accurate? I mean, now you've got the convergence of AI based on analytics that, and obviously garbage in, garbage out, it's only as good as the data in, data out, but you've got that converging to drive smart contracts on blockchain. And now whether, you and I can decide what constructs we put on those and then conditionally execute those with opposing contracts on the opposite side, and so in that sense, if we talk about certain things where, which I think this will revolutionize, one of them is education. Our system's pretty much stuck in Victorian times, desks at the front, and education shouldn't be consistently the same across the board because everyone responds differently to that. But equally, it's become the access of the privileged as opposed to the wider ones. And I'm not talking about some socialist ideology here, but actually, if you're good at something, why can't you raise capital or finance yourself based on future cash flows and expectation value, right? And democratize that. So, we have the ability now to empower ourselves more than what we think. And it's not going to happen overnight because this top-down society going bottom-up, again, not to sit on the fence, but maybe the right answer is somewhere in between, because you're right, we have to be accountable. That can come through transparency, and obviously there could be a natural convergence to the greater good, but we know there is also bad. And we also know that actually you don't necessarily need a police state, right? You don't want to live in a police state, but sometimes you might need to call upon the police or the fire brigade because you really need them, right? So there has to be a balance too.
But in that transformative phase from the bottom up, from top down to bottom up, and empowering the individual, there's going to be some disruption. There's going to be reduced jobs and services in various sectors. Technology will drive down prices of goods and services. There's a lot of ethical concerns along the way because there'll still be the power houses that will train algorithms on data sets to amplify discrimination, et cetera, for their own benefit. So there's going to be that disruptive phase. There needs to be a way in which, and we talked about policy earlier, but how best do we actually enable that transformation? I know that Kristof was speaking a lot about, from his perspective, the technology that he's proposing to put in place. You, Hirander, are living it, doing the digital transformation as we speak in the financial world. And Effie, very strong on policy and change, and I love the word economy. Let's look after the house in that digital transformation. Effie, could you just, how do we minimize that impact if there is an innovation?
The only way is to prioritize empathy to all the people that are left behind, because we four are sitting here, we are immersed in what is going on in technological innovation. We're coming from different angles, but this is, we feel it under our skin, that the pace of innovation that is happening. But there's so many other people that are, have no idea what is going on and have no idea what is going to hit them. So the way to deal with this and prevent the social unrest and the social problems and the inequalities that inadvertently are going to be created, the only way is education. And I'm talking about upskilling people. You can do it formally, you can do it informally, but it has to be one of the things that needs to be happening continuously. Companies have to continuously upskill their employees, not because they need the task done, but because a company is what? It's the people that work there. And unless they are able to change their mindset and understand what is going on and follow the technological change, it's just not going to happen. So for me, it's all about upskilling people, and we as individuals, we can also do it. You know, anybody that is in a position that understands the change needs to communicate it to the people. There's so much, I mean, I see it every day in different pockets of society. People are behind. And I'm talking about professionals in high positions. They're just looking at their daily, you know, whatever they are focused on, and are unaware of the changes that are brewing. And that
short-termism for personal gain.
It's not only short-termism, it's, you know, at the end of the day, we all have a myopic view. We all, you know, can operate in a limited circle of people. So we happen to be in technology, in innovation, and so on. But there's so many other people that are not.
Yeah. No, this is interesting. And just a couple of points I want to comment on there as well, which are interesting. So one thing, Hilton, you said, will there be job losses? Yes, there will, but there were in the Industrial Revolution as well. But actually the nature of jobs and that's a lot to do with Society 5.0, because the nature of what we do will inevitably change. So do there need to be, change in roles? Yeah, absolutely. The problem you have with short-termism is many companies are all too happy to fire those that become obsolete, and then they'll rehire and, at the same time cost cut as well. So, Effie's absolutely right. There's got to be that. In some cases, actually, sometimes you're forced to do it. So, for example, you mentioned at the start, Hilton, we're doing a lot of work in the Seychelles, both on the legal side and on the fintech side. And there they said, look, they're in their shadows, they've got Mauritius with 1.3 million people. The Seychelles has 98,000 people. And I was sat with one of the individuals at senior in government. They said, Hirander, we have to automate. We have no other choice because we don't have the people that they have. So actually, they're forced to embrace a fourth industrial revolution, but actually that's creating innovation, whereas elsewhere there is complacency. We saw that with Singapore vis-a-vis Malaysia as well, and so there's that. The other thing is, if he's absolutely right, there's going to be fundamental changes in certain professions. Like the legal profession is ripe for disruption because at the moment, very, very paper-based, but with smart contracts now, you've got dynamic updates and a full audit trail with the legal side. And it's much like me saying to you, Hilton, we've invented email, but actually you've still got to send me a letter. It's going to take me 10 days to do it. Everything can be tracked. Contracts can be updated easily. And that's going to fundamentally change. And what does that mean for lawyers out there? Yeah, there'll need to be lawyers that embrace technology, and the way that you affect legal work has got to fundamentally change. And the other thing that you mentioned about certain jobs being lost. I remember reading something about when the automobile was invented, and then I think it was the New York Times, because there used to be a man with a flag in front of a car to prevent people from being run over, right? And I think there's a famous quote in the New York Times saying, why do we have automobiles? A horse and carriage is safer, right? And look at where we are now. So there's always going to be resistance to change because people don't necessarily embrace change easily. And I think what Effie said, it's important. There's got to be an element of, not everyone's ready to embrace it wholeheartedly, but they've got to kind of step into it somehow and ease into it. And it's how we do that, both at a company level, how we do that at a national level, and everything in between that becomes key, I think. And some nations are wholly going to embrace it. I honestly think, everyone sees Mauritius in Africa as being the key hub and developing. I honestly think Seychelles will leapfrog them, despite any short-term adjustments and pain. And you're going to see that in other jurisdictions and other regions too.
Again, we have to go back to intention. Governments or other agencies have to put a priority in upskilling workers. And this is not done through, the traditional educational system. It's a continuous process. It has to be more like an open university, the companies.
Yes.
I mean, I get upset with this. I have a very recent, maybe 10 months ago, big financial institution in Europe that laid off 40,000 employees, at the same time committed to spend 13 million euros in fintech. Okay, so why don't you take 1 million of those euros and upskill half of those people that you laid off? I mean, this is, you care about the people.
Yeah.
If I may, I agree with what you guys say, but I'm trying to sort of feedback off to what I hear. First of all, I don't think that technology will resolve any of these issues. Actually, the reverse, because today people are overloaded with choices and overloaded with technical complexity. Sure, we can upscale them and learn them more, but why? Let me give you an example. On your phone, how many apps do we use? Many, right? Maybe 50 or 100. Why do we need 100 apps? It just doesn't make any sense. If I want to play squash, I need to remember, oh, is it an SMS? Is it a WhatsApp? Is it a Telegram? Is it, I mean, it's awfully done, actually, how it all came together. And if we look how it happens into enterprise and whatever, it's not getting better, it's getting more complicated and more complicated. So to me, technology is not a solution to all of this. We actually need to do the reverse. Things need to be brought back to something much more simple. And once you put people in the central, actually, and you think about it and you go further, you will see that so many of these things become literally 100 times more easy. GDPR, no issue anymore because it's linked to a person, as an example. But so many things just go away. You don't need 100 different databases anymore. You don't exist 100 times anymore, because at the end, the person on the street doesn't need all this complexity. Why does it have to learn 20 tools to work on a digital life? It doesn't make sense. Why do you have to change your app in every city you go? Again, it doesn't make sense, because these things are not centered around the person. But once we change that mindset and we force the engineers to think a little bit more what the people want and what they need, automatically it all becomes much more easy and things are going to be much more useful and more things will happen. We don't have to rely anymore on these big corporates as much, because around us in our local environments, we'll be able to do much more. I'm a globalist. I like the world to be global, but I believe that the new global is local. It starts from the people around you, from the environments where you live in. But we are good in communication everywhere over the world, but local around us, these things are not possible anymore because of decentralization. So by making things more simple again and putting people in the communities and so on in the center, we can resolve everything. And another small thing, which is, I'm absolutely not one of these guys being against rules or regulations or governments. Actually, the reverse. I believe that governments and cities need to be helped. They need to get more simple options how to deal with their citizens and how it can, because now it's awfully complicated, right? And that sort of doesn't lead to the innovations we need. So one of the metrics we all should use is simplicity. How can we things make super simple again? And if you put the people in the center of the digital life, you can create circles. Just like in real life, you work with circles too. And one of those circles is your school, is your city, is your country. And that is an easy way to basically enforce these rules in a way that it's transparent and we all understand them. So basically what I'm saying here is a message for hope, which is not technology-wise of nature. It's a mind shift. It's that people need to start thinking that it is okay to empower the person on the street and to make things more simple and to come up with new paradigms, data paradigms, but also how we can empower people to play with the people around them and build a bigger community, which is not based on survival of the fittest, Darwin, but it's based on collaborating to build something bigger.
No, that's very interesting. I mean, collaboration versus competition. I like that. Building from your local community outwards. This is very, very, very powerful. And it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, is building from the bottom up society, empowering people, which I think is an educating people to be empowered. I think that's quite important, allowing them to be empowered. But at the end of the day, the individual today is effectively the product. The individual today is being abused effectively by these big corporations or other large stakeholders, and therefore they don't care. They know that they're being abused. They don't care
because they feel powerless. They think they can't change it.
They can't change anything. Exactly.
And if you restore that as a government and you say you do matter, and you can change it, and this is a tool we give you so that you can change it, you will see how everything will change because I will feel empowered again.
Yes. I mean, thinking, going back to Effie and your Greek heritage, I mean, the Greeks were one of the greatest examples of citizens and building citizens and empowering citizens to have a voice. Are we going back in that direction to the old Greek days or before Sparta?
Well, I mean, like with everything, we need scalable global solutions, right? What Kristof was saying. So it's not simple to take that model and and transform it to today's parameters. I wanted to reflect on what Kristof said. Because really, Kristof, if I understand correctly, you're talking about the existing governance model, which of course is top down, but it's also not based on collaboration, right? It's absolutely based on competition and the survival of the fittest. And it's and the incentive structure that exists in the economies, right, is such that it reinforces this behavior. And I don't want to say a victim. I'm also, I've also grown up and worked in that sort of in that kind of market with these dynamics. And what we are talking here, that the vision should be not only flipped and bottom up, but the governance should be different, collaborative. So you have to change all the incentive structure. I mean, starting from the financial incentives and the compensation to all the other incentives, right?
Yes.
So it becomes quite fundamental.
Yes, I know, but it's much easier than we would think. And of course, like this, because it's not because we're not used to it, that it means it is complicated. Actually, things would become much more simple. But yes, it is a mind shift. But the good thing about these things is if only 10% of the people would start behaving differently, they would automatically pull the rest in, and you would get that change. And of course, governments would have to help, because you said it, right? Without education and without information and without explaining the reason why, this has no chance. But you can start with a small city or a small village, and you can see how it's.
To ask you, are you suggesting that this could be piloted in a community, in a village, in a city?
Exactly. And you see it already happening, by the way. This is already happening. There are communities where people adopt new ways of collaboration and how to work together, and they use modern technologies to do so. And I've met already wonderful people who build systems for that. And then you see it actually working, and that gives a lot of hope. And people, by the way, also become more happy because they feel more fulfilled. Because by sharing, because it has to do at the end with male and female energy. If you look at the way how the world is done, by sharing, you can also get things back. So now for us, it's we're taking and then we give back, but you can turn it around, right? And it's again a paradigm.
Giving is receiving in that context, because it's not only measured by the material stuff.
And I believe it's happening no matter what, because it's the only way out of where we're in. The more it gets extreme in this Darwinism, the more that people will say we don't want this anymore. And there will be some accidents, of course, but people will change that way because it's the only way out, in my personal opinion.
The pandemic actually is accelerating this, because I was speaking to an eco-friendly house builder in the UK, and actually they made it a point not to build rabbit hutches, but developments in large acreage of space with a community feel. And they've done a lot of work with one of the solar power companies and battery makers as well. And they said, look, people are selling up out of central London now, and they'd much rather now move out of town, because they could be working from anywhere. Look at us, we're in different places, and actually they want and they crave a better style of life. So sometimes it needs a catalyst, and I think we've got that catalyst now. It's made us all evaluate what we do, how we live. And I think there's no looking back to this now, actually, which will align with kind of where you think we're going with this, Kristof.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, everybody. This has been, and we could go on for another hour, and I think we could revisit this at another time and do another session and record this. I really want to thank the three of you all for your contribution and your time. Effie, thank you very much for coming on from Canton of Fribourg. Hirander in London, and Kristof also in Switzerland, apparently. But thank you very much for supporting us at Cities ABC and Open Business Council with this panel session day with Digital Week Online. I hope that we've opened up everybody's insights into how we move forward in terms of flipping society around in terms of Fourth Industrial Revolution, Society 5.0. We talked about a bit of sustainability, fintech. We touched on data. We did spend a bit of time on regulations and ESG. So I thank you all very much for your participation, and look forward to speaking to you again. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you,
Hilton. Very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everybody.
So, picking up from this fantastic shadow, I'll do the notes. Yeah, we need a bit of champagne and some celebration.
I'm sure you're not alone.
So no, fantastic. It's really great insights, and like Hilton said, we could go for hours. So it's been a great day. From all the people involved, we have been having around 20 governments involved, and around a lot of experts and personalities. I want to highlight a couple of things that were said in the panel as a wrap-up notes. Tomorrow there's a continuation, so the Digital Week Online continues. This is our day. This is an event by Juliet and Ivan that are really doing fantastic work, putting it all together with around 200 speakers. I think just some highlights of the day. I think, like you guys mentioned on this panel, which is fantastic and impressive notes, definitely there's a lot of going on in terms of digital transformation. There's a lot of challenges. And I think when we look at the concept of Society 5.0, it's precisely about the human-centric society, which was the topic of the day. Something actually that the Japanese government started. We didn't actually brought someone from the Japanese government, but we're going to get in the next event. And I interviewed actually the Minister of Science and Technology recently. But I think these concepts are really key, and I think we are only in the beginning of this. But I think, like you put it very well in this panel and during the day, the challenge is how we're going to be going from theory to the practice and dealing with the element part of this. And I think Effie mentioned the point of continuous education, and I think that is a very, very important thing, because our updates need to be continuous, and I think like we reboot the operating systems, we need to reboot ourselves, and very few people have the capacity for that. And I think, like Hirander mentioned, we are still in an education that is Victorian, especially in the English-speaking countries, but as well, most of the countries around the world is that you go to university, you get out of the university, and you forget that you need to continue learning. And this is a big challenge, because of course, the ones that can actually tackle this can create multi-billion-dollar or trillion-dollar business. And they're not doing anything wrong. So actually, we need as well to share the innovation that comes at the risk of them. But I think the challenge is that this creates a lot of disparity. And I think one of the challenge, and I think Kristof mentioned one thing critical. At the moment, we are, and this part of the vision of Society 5.0 is that we have a digital twin of each other. So we have our data, but at the moment we have like thousands of twins, all our different social profiles, all of our governments have a completely chaos of digital identity of us. And I think this is the biggest challenge, is that this chaos creates a lot of opportunity for a lot of chaos and for disruption and dystopian. Challenge we're facing. Of course, it's not easy to face it in the sense of trying to just right now go and create an authoritarian way of looking at this, and this is kind of a risk that it can actually fall very easily. But I think especially the ideas of sustainability and as well the financial inclusion and the regulation and the ESG can be done in a constructive way. And I think that's the purpose of this day. And some of the notes that you have, I think probably another thing I want to highlight, for instance, what Ben said, and it was as well highly retweeted and as well involved from you, Effie, and a lot of people. I think is if you just focus probably 10% of what we focus in a lot of stupidity of our human nature, we could get a lot of other things.
Nicely, I really liked it.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
Selling, killing, gaming, spying,
and gambling. Yeah, completely. So it's a very important thing, and as well one important thing as well that I want. Was the relationship with governments. We have around 10 or 20 governments today, or at least people representatives. And I think one of the challenges is that they have to live, and we have to integrate them. And we as citizens, we are as influencers and partners, and of course all work director, and we are part of governments or part of nations. So we have a responsibility as well. So I think that I want to probably finish with a sense of responsibility that we all have. And that's about the sense of action. And I think one of the things, especially Ben is behind Humanity Plus, and Maya mentioned as well a lot of interesting things. We had as well the Minister of Communications of Malaysia, Reza Hussain, that are working in the concept of Malaysia 5.0. We had the representative of Pakistan that is working in a strategy related with solutions around financial inclusion and as well integrating the people in the rural areas to these digital things. And as well, for instance, Ukraine, that actually created new concept of investing in the country outside of the country without even needing to go in the country, which with COVID-19 is really important. We had as well a fantastic panel moderated by Azad Sultan that highlighted some of the leading startup hubs from Hong Kong to Bangladesh to Betai to there's a lot of other countries in Latin America, and Richard Greenfield that has been working there, AGA and PT, that is actually a company actually working with the center of Europe. So we had a bit of all the world. I know that during the days there will be an African day, the next days of the week. And as well, the Smart Cities panel that was excellent in terms of insights, how to really effectively looking at cities from the angle of creating the puzzle that is the technology of smart cities, but as well making it effective and between different players and open innovation. And of course, we touch as well cybersecurity with Agia and moderation, and as well a fantastic panel with multiple speakers that are as well look at the element. Actually, cybersecurity is all about humans. So I want to thank everyone involved as a team of Ztudium and techabc, and as well, especially all the speakers and that contributed their time and the great insights. The ones that are listening to us all over the world, I think we had around 500 to 1,000 people during today in each panel, so it was actually quite a good number. And I think the videos are already available in the two channels, both the Digital Week Online and our channel. And I'm talking just purely numbers on YouTube, because this has been streamed in a lot of other channels, and this is going to be amplified in the next couple of days. So thank you all. Very grateful to this day. Actually, I learned a lot myself, and I think I'm very grateful to have you all.